Hi folks, it's David here, just asking you for a wee favour. If you don't mind, could you follow us on Apple Podcasts, Android or Spotify, wherever you listen to the show? It's a huge help for us. They might ask you if you want to leave a review. If you could leave a nice one, we'd be very, very grateful. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome to Heart and Hand Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar and as always I am your host, and we have reached that Schrodinger's stage of the season again for Rangers. A little earlier this year, but we are here again where it's give it time, it might work and it might not. But here to discuss the probability of either are first of all jetting in from abroad, well, metaphorically anyway, is David Graham. Hello Davey.
Davey, how are you? Evening listeners.
I can't believe you gave up your holiday time, A, to watch that, and B, to talk about it a couple of days later.
No, nor can I, but here we are.
Here we are. And from even further afield, out in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, is Gary Gillan, past president of NARSA. Hello, Gaz.
Hey, hello, gents. I wish I was here under better circumstances. Thanks very much for the invite for this week.
Aye, well, somebody had to draw the short straw, and unfortunately in this case it was you. Rangers won, Dundee won at the weekend. And Davey, straight away, I'm going to be upfront myself here that this has left me rather grumpy. I'm probably more disappointed than I was against Motherwell, and I'll explain why. First game of the season, things can happen. People who listened to our show last week will know that it wasn't happy at all with what I saw in the second half. But then genuinely terrific performance against Victoria Pilsen, playing the way we want to see Rangers play, front foot, attacking, try to win goals, try to win games, try to score goals. Then at the weekend, I went in with the expectation. I was expecting a comfortable win. Dundee are not a good side. They've not been playing well. And yes, I knew that it would take a wee while to break them down, but I expected Rangers to go out after Tuesday night with a verve, confident, and instead what I saw was something we've seen far too often for a number of seasons. Rangers were slow, completely wasted the first half again by nowhere near enough attacking intent. And there is a difference, by the way, between successful attacking but not even attempting it, shuttling the ball pointlessly and needlessly side to side. Then in the second half, concede a stupid goal, go down to 10 men again through a mistake of our own, and rally late, got a goal, might have pinched it at the end, but I'm so sick of Rangers sides needing to go a goal down or needing to find themselves in a tough situation before they start playing like that. And that opening 70 minutes at the weekend, I just thought, this is a terrible movie that I've been forced to watch far too many times.
Yeah, well, I think, David, that's part of the problem is really what we're going to say in many ways this evening is something that we've said for years now, if we're frank and we're honest. I think probably best to sum it up, if you were watching that game on Saturday, as a neutral, if it was a scouting video and you had to say, look, didn't know who the teams were, and you said, right, who's the team that's, essentially playing like the relegation contenders, and who's the team playing like, they're championship contenders? If we're frank, you almost would have flipped it in its head. You also would have said that the team playing in blue were the away team, because we were so timid, we were so safe, summed up by the fact that, the player that played the most passes in the game was our centre defender. And I think in a way we've just seen this movie too many times. And look, we'll get into talking about Russell Martin and all the various expectations, etc. But even isolated, if we're frank, if last Tuesday night was some of the best moments that we've seen in many a year under any manager at Ibrox, with some really nice free flowing football, loads of positives, aesthetically really pleasing the eye. For honest, that first hour to 70 minutes on Saturday was arguably as bad as we've been served up in the last decade or so, and mind you, that's saying something. So I don't want to be sensationalist, but I think we were also positive after Tuesday night. We probably actually cut Russell Martin a bit of slack after last Saturday. We're probably a bit harder on the defenders, but I think what happened in Saturday past was, in my view, indefensible. And I mean, it has to be a line in the sand, because we really can't be served that up, too many more times this season.
Now, Gary, that's an interesting point David makes about the level of scar tissue that is among the support. Now, in an ideal world, I'm sure that the new owners and the new coaching staff and new staff at Ibrox would have loved to come in and say, right, it's a clean slate, but it doesn't work like that. We have been watching this for a number of years. And while it might not be fair and they need to be judged on what they do and it'll take time, all these things that are true, that's the thing. You cannot, when people are having this discussion and this argument, you cannot say that these aren't facts. It is very early. It is only, 4 competitive games so far. 5. No, I was right first time. So that is all true. However, it does, you can't help it. I mean, I certainly can't when I'm sitting watching this and it's the same stuff we've seen so often. And again, for me, not simply the bad result of bad performance, but the manner of it, the attitude of it, that fear, that safe option constantly, not really trying to do anything that would draw attention to yourself. But then when it gets desperate towards the end, going for it and actually beginning to cause some problems and get the crowd off their seat. I'm just fed up with it. I'm just sick of watching that.
I mean, for me, this industry is different to almost any other industry that I can think of, where we're well within our rights to accommodate the history part of it and say, yes, there is absolute merit for a clean slate. You kind of don't get one. And I think the reason that the atmosphere, even just among this conversation between the three of us pals here, is the way that it is we've seen this time and time and time and time again. So there was no real surprise at the weekend. The only surprise would be how much of a roller coaster we experienced between Tuesday and Saturday. So, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And we've changed the players, kinda, and we're still getting the exact same sort of thing. So the thing for me, I was thinking about this morning, actually, and I'd love your guys' thoughts on it. Russell Martin made a point of saying, this is the pattern. This is my words, not his words, but this is the pattern that we've experienced in every club that we've gone to. There's been a dip in the beginning and then it gets better. So my thought pattern is, if you're looking for continuous improvement, Russell, and you're the guy that said, we know we need to win as we're building, his words, not mine, when he was doing the press conferences prior to the season starting, how would you not figure out how to get rid of that dip in the beginning? Because I don't think it's style. In the beginning, we're asking the guys to take on a lot right now and such. Right, okay, maybe. You still said you had to win. You still have experienced this before. You should still have been able to try in some way to arrest this fall, because we're in a very, very similar position, actually a worse position if you go statistically in terms of the results at the beginning of the season, than we have been for the last, if you take away 55, for the last, since we came back, anyway, and up into the Premier League. And everybody's fed up with it. And he has to get this right, because he's made an absolute mess of the first 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. The team has not really displayed any of the new characteristics that we were hoping to see. And you do expect teething troubles. But if I'm honest, whenever I say that, it's, I knew there would be things at the start. I still expected us to beat Motherwell and Dundee. And I think that's a kind of universal view. You would still expect Rangers to beat Dundee. Now, coming up against a low block, Davey, it was, Dundee played a 5-5-0 for most of the game, thought they could hit on the break and they could do better at set pieces, and they did, and fair play to them, they got their tactics right. I'm not going to complain about that, because if we go away in Europe against a side with far greater resources and we do that and we get a result, I'll think we'll have earned it, so I'm not going to be a hypocrite about it. But it really does fall on Rangers to be able to break that down. And something that I have moaned and moaned and moaned and will continue to until it changes is Rangers' lethargic openings, which allows other teams to come to Rangers and settle in to the ground, because there'll be nerves. They're at Ibrox. They've not started the season well. We just tonked aside 3-0 in Europe, which they will have seen. And 45 minutes of utter nothing. Nothing happens. And we allow a side to grow in, get confident, get the crowd frustrated, and then the second half becomes far more of a challenge. And this feels constant. I mean, this does feel like something that happens all the time. Rangers start these matches so incredibly passively.
Yeah, well, I think the the irony is, and this isn't me having any sort of dig at the subway loyal as people that leave the game are colloquially known as. I mean, reality of it is probably the best kind of 10 or 15 minutes you get at Ibrox. Somewhere about 75 minutes on, where the team then go into panic mode and start to kind of throw the kitchen sink, trying to sort of scramble together some sort of respectable result. I mean, in reality, you'd be better sitting in the district or the Loudon until half time and dandering up for the second half because
Till you hear Rangers have conceded, basically.
yeah, exactly. I remember growing up where the odd time we would have conceded first, and you kind of shrugged your shoulders and went, well, sure, we'll win 3 or 4-1 today. At least this might be a bit more exciting. Whilst now, you've such a lack of faith, I suppose, in the team that you're almost waiting for the other team to score. It's almost that thing of, right, lads, well, we know you're going to score, then we're going to kind of maybe potentially get kicked into action. And I think that's the real kind of difficulty, is that there's been no real new manager bounce. That sort of sense of, and maybe that's, and I know Davey, you mentioned it in the daily update, and we'll probably talk about it again. Maybe it's because of kind of how Russell Martin has been appointed and how he's been received. But you've said yourself, and we were getting results under Pedro. I remember, I think we actually won away to Motherwell under Pedro early in the season. From memory, it was definitely in August 2017, and I think.
Yeah, 2-0.
Yeah, and I think, like, if you had looked at the fixtures at the start of the season, I mean, I think all three of us would have said, okay, Fir Park can be a bit of a banana skin, but first home game to Dundee between European ties, yeah, that should be a bit of a gimme, and I'm sure there's a lot of coupons got busted yesterday over that result. So, look, talk around in circles till the cows come home, but it is just the same being served up time and time again, whether you change the players, whether you change the manager. And I think, he's mentioned about the culture and everything else, but you still have to win to build that positive culture, because I think it's so difficult. And you know yourself, Davey, from even being in the press room, the feeling and the atmosphere in the place when you win compared to when you lose or drop points even.
Yeah, 100%. And, Gary, Davey touches on something there, which is a few people have got in touch with me at Heartland Towers and said I was a wee bit surprised at, just how angry the crowd were at the start of the second half. And I thought, well, I wasn't. Now, look, booing a substitution is absolutely fine. That's letting the manager know you don't rate it. Then also booing when the player comes on, I think, is a bit much, because it's not the player's fault. It's not Dowell's fault. What's he meant to do? Saying, no, don't put me on. I don't want to go on with far less respect for him than that. But it is just frustration, so it's totally understandable. And I do think there's something in what David says about this is what happens when you hire a manager that there is virtually no excitement for.
Yeah.
Not many people wanted him. Not many people said, yeah, it's a great appointment, we have to go out and get him. And therefore, yes, you do have to prove yourself. And unfortunately, that also means that you've got to go off strongly to assuage those doubts. And I'd actually compare it, believe it or not, to Alex McLeish. When Alex McLeish first arrived, there was not a groundswell of opinion that he should get the job. In fact, it was quite the opposite. But he started winning very, very quickly. Drew his first game, as I recall, but started winning very, very quickly. And then that, the momentum built and people got behind him. But in the case of Russell Martin, so far, great result against Panathinaikos. Probably a better result than we've maybe been given credit for or given ourselves enough credit for. Great performance against Pilsen. But in a way, that almost just reinforces a trope that we were hoping would get broken, which is the side can pick itself up for you, or Rangers, because it is, they're different players, can pick themselves up for European matches, can pick themselves up for Old Firm matches. But when you put them in these bread and butter games where the crowd isn't, riotous, and it's not going to be 90 minutes of non-stop singing, which, by the way, happens at every big club. If you go to Anfield to see them take on Real Madrid, you'll get a different atmosphere when they take on Bournemouth. But you have to be aware of that, I think, and then understand that this criticism is going to come because there are deep-lying issues in behind it. And I do understand people saying, well, we need to be patient. That's why I go back to the whole Schrodinger's thing, because you can say, look, he's brand new in the door. He needs time. Doesn't even have all his signings on the park yet. Doesn't even have the squad building for this window complete yet. That is true. And you would expect it to get better. And I would, right? Under any manager, you would expect it to get better. But until some of these key fears that the Rangers support have are broken and showing up and to no longer exist, then you are going to have to work in this atmosphere. And again, we can debate if that's right or wrong, but it does exist.
Yeah, I think I don't like booing any Rangers player for any reason at any time. I would never do that. And maybe if one got a red card in a very crucial moment, maybe. But in general terms, no. I thought it was a wee bit naive in the press conference afterwards when he says, "Well, listen, I'm not on any social media, so I don't know what the narrative is around Kieran Dow. All I'm doing is measuring him on what I've seen in the training ground thus far." Now, I can understand the latter part of that, but having Davy Graham here, from a communication perspective, there would be some communication flow internally within the club to say, right, listen, here's how the fans feel about these particular types and styles of players, and there's probably a wee handful that are divisive in some way or super popular or whatever that looks like. So to go on the plead complete ignorance part for Dowell is not fair. It's actually not fair on Kieran Doyle. And the irony is, I thought he played okay when he came on, but we're looking at Kieran Doyle now through a different lens, because he's almost like this lightning rod for all things that are wrong with Rangers, which is again not very fair. I just go back to what he said. I know I'm kind of semi-repeating myself here, but he said, we know we have to win as we're building. And it doesn't look like he knows how to build a winning team as he's building. And that's the big worry for me. I thought we were going to see like this, kind of hodgepodge of signings where you're like this 34-year-old guy from the Championship, that's odd. And this other guy from this other place, and he kind of concocts this team that kind of is a morphing or some sort of early stage view of what it looks like or what it's going to look like at the end. But it looks like he's kind of bypassed that particular part and has decided to just go for the finished article. I know it's not going to be the finished article after one transfer window, but I don't see on the field, certainly domestically, what he said he was going to do. And to David Graham's point, we haven't had that new manager bounce that we've enjoyed. Now, that's one wee crumb of comfort that I've got, because we have had that new manager bounce with every new manager that we've had over the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. So maybe this opposite part is something that might work out, and we're like, you know what, actually that worked out well. We gave him the gears in the beginning, and then he started to actually turn it around. But as I was saying on the NASA podcast last week, the problem he has is we don't have time. We don't have time for this domestically at all. And that's been proven over the years, because that team from the East End, they don't lose the type and style of points that we lose, and they don't lose the number of points that we need them to lose for us to be realistic challengers.
Yeah, on that, David, in terms of, support or mood, does it penetrate at all? Like, I don't so much mean, club employees, because I know, generally speaking, most of the people who work at the vast majority of people who work at the club are Rangers supporters, and obviously their mates tell them, and they feel it themselves. But the training ground itself does things, as Gaz said there about, Kieran Dow. Does it penetrate? Is it really a case of them genuinely not knowing that he is seen as an embodiment of the failure of transfer policy of the team the last couple of seasons? Because it sometimes does appear to fans that in this age where players are much more distant because of money and lifestyle and whatnot than they were when I was growing up. Does it ever permeate that?
Look, I think the last thing that any Rangers fan wants, or any football fan for that matter, is, with respect, if if your manager was listening to a podcast at Heart and Hand with respect, or trekking through follow to try to sort of be influenced to work the team. I mean, with respect to ourselves and to Big Mark, that's a recipe for disaster, because football fans are incredibly emotional creatures, and we know that all three of us being so. I think though what I would say is it does seem somewhat naive if Russell Martin's saying, "Oh no, I don't go on social media, so I don't really know that." Well, if Kieran Doyle had had a successful career up to Russell Martin coming, and Russell Martin has said now on umpteen occasions, "Oh yeah, I watched so many games when I thought I was in for the job." Well, he would have watched games, realised that Kieran Doyle was out last season and known to Birmingham. So I suppose the first question would ask is, well, why was that the case? Now, I feel sorry for Kieran Doyle because,
Yeah,
by
so does
all
I.
accounts, he's a really good lad. Now, listen, being a really good lad doesn't mean you necessarily get, you should start for Rangers. That could
Correct.
make that.
And that's the fans' frustration. I don't think
Yeah,
anyone has anything
no,
personal against the
no.
guy.
He's just kind of he's become the sort of totemic sort of
Yeah.
figure. I think though that the slight issue we've got here, and it's a wider point, and I said this to you, I think, on an update last week, Davey. I respected what Russell Martin said in terms of being so vociferous after Fir Park, but I did say that I felt that he had essentially emptied the cartridge of all his bullets, so there was like nowhere really kind of else for him to really. He had created a little wriggle room for himself. The issue that I really have, and Kieran Doyle is one of them, he drops Tav, he drops Raskin, he drops Danilo, and he drops Doyle for midweek game, and it actually all works out. So in a way, he deserves the plaudits then. Where I become frustrated is they're the four players who are brought on Saturday to save the game, having, I suppose, not directly and not directly called out by the manager, but certainly, he was quite clear as to, some players were walking about, some players, had there was issues mentally, etc., etc. So
Yeah.
that's a problem within a week. I mean, we're talking about a roller coaster. It's very much a pendulum swing there, isn't it?
And that is a legit thing because, as you say, we can only take the comments we've got and the actions that follow them. So anybody thinking that, I don't think it's an outrageous thing to think. And yeah, you're looking for a reaction from those players, but it certainly didn't lighten the mood at the weekend at Ibrox. Gary, to play devil's dick advocate a little bit here, what some supporters are saying, not the majority, I have to say, but some supporters are saying is, look, it'll take time, new players to bed in, and we don't actually have all the players we need yet. And I have a little bit of sympathy for that because he wants to play a certain way. I think you need a keeper who's better with the ball at his feet, more confident when he comes out of his goal to play that. I think you need an actual left-sided centre-back, although we hear Mendy's coming in that would do that. I think you need another left-back. I think I still don't like the midfield balance, and I spoke about that last week. Still not sure that this midfield balance is right, and I think you still need a number 9 because we've had just such a Cyril Dessers week, which he was I thought he was brilliant on Tuesday. I really did. Thought he was great. Then at the weekend, I thought he was really poor. And that's unfortunately what you're going to get from Cyril Dessers. So there still do need to be players brought in, but the model, the machine, it isn't functioning smoothly at the moment, and players don't really quite look to me, and I am an amateur, but look to me like they quite fully understand what they're supposed to be doing, or maybe even why.
Yeah, I can't remember what one of you two lads had said earlier, but I mean, I think this is, and I've said this to you as well, David, it's boring to watch because there's not a lot happening, so I don't mind the possession play if it's going to, at some point manifest itself into a reasonable chance that gives us an opportunity to go, right, okay, I see what they were trying there. That was exciting. That was good. And I'm talking domestically here. The European stuff kind of takes care of itself, it seems to be. But the thing is that we've just settled in already just with 2 games, and that's all we're basing it on. But no real genuine surprises. And it seems to be that the teams that we are playing, and at 2 very different styles between Motherwell and Dundee, they just know how to play against us. It's almost like we're being out coached. Because if you look at, for example, I mean, you talk about Jack Butland with the ball at his feet. I mean, for him to get lobbed by that header on the weekend there, I didn't really think about it too much at the time until afterwards when I watched it again. And that's not cool for a goalie of his supposed quality to be getting lobbed with a header there. It wasn't like a fluke where it was supposed to be going across and he got wrong footed or anything. He's standing on his line and he gets himself lobbed there. And if you look at the way that we're bringing the ball out from the back, and that produces some hairy moments because we're just not quite used to that just yet. And when it got to the red card and John Souttar comes out and you can see the Dundee players almost anticipating being able to cut that pass out from John Souttar, and then the ball very quickly goes back the way, and then the 2 of them kind of do what they do, and then he gets a red card, and off he goes. So we're very, very predictable after just a couple of games with, half of the team kind of new to the club, not kind of new to the club. So there's something more systemic there. So does that speak to what Russell Martin was saying afterwards? We're going to have to change the fabric and the culture of this club, and it's going to take a bit of time and such like that. Well, he's changed his tune, because 2 weeks before it, he was saying, we're going to do everything we can to win, and we're going to make ourselves difficult to play against, with and without the ball, and high intensity and such. And I haven't seen any of that. Like, there's been, even in game, even in half, you see 3 or 4 different types and styles of Rangers caricature, and it's confusing, it's frustrating, and I'm just not hugely entertained overall at all.
Davey, on that, I did expect to see a more physical, hard-running style, and I haven't seen much evidence of it myself at this point, despite the influx of new players.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably the sort of, there's probably a sense, and I don't want to kind of keep harping back to sort of the past, because Russell Martin's our manager, okay? So we need to accept that. We need to support him and support the team. But I think there's always been a sense of, this is what you'll expect from a Russell Martin team. And at one stage, I was watching the game on RTV, and there was an infographic that come up that was something like 85% in the last 10, 15 minutes, 85% possession of the Rangers, something like 20 shots compared to literally low single figures for Dundee. So there's always that kind of stereotype of, you'll have loads of the ball, you'll have high levels of possession, but you'll end up, losing games 1-0 and that sort of thing. So in a way, I think that the difficulty is in how you combat that, is they do have that sort of style football, which is swashbuckling, it's powerful, you're essentially running over the top of teams. And as you say, as soon as we doubled up Dundee doubled up on our 2 wingers on Saturday, it just felt like we had kind of nowhere to go. That's why I think, John Suter passed the ball the most, because he just had it and he passed it to someone, they almost just passed it back to him. And I think that's probably the concern to me. You said it in the update earlier, and I think you said it on this as well. It's just that sort of fearful football. And, I think maybe more so under Steven Gerrard than when he was a manager, but Mick Beale always talked about, releasing the handbrake, taking the handbrake off, and it just feels at the minute that we're just not getting out of first gear, because I think we're so worried about making a mistake. And ultimately, as Richard Gough, one of the greatest ever Rangers players and captain, said, at a normal club you're judged on your last game, your last result. At Rangers, you're judged on your last pass. And I think that ultimately the weight of the shirt is going to be very, very heavy, regardless of the fact that we've won 1 league title since 2011. So, players either need to, I suppose, I hate the term, but either, shit or get off the pot, because I think too many of them are taking the easy road out.
Yeah, and that's a long-term complaint of mine, that bravery in football isn't, smashing somebody with an elbow and getting sent off. Bravery is taking the ball when there's no space. And you're right, I thought at the weekend we did look a little bit in the first half, and I've seen this several times, of, well, there's no space. What do you expect me to do? Kind of thing. And it's like, well, get used to that. I actually said that to Russell Martin in the press conference. That is, that game today is 80% of what you're going to face in Scotland. And, you can't hope to succeed if you look quite as listless and as clueless, really, in terms of breaking that down than we did. And it is disappointing. I will cut Samson slightly, because he did keep going and, of course, wins a penalty towards the end. But again, a wee bit like after we conceded at Fir Park, suddenly there's intent, suddenly there's verve, but we've only got a couple of minutes. Same at the weekend. Suddenly in the last 5-10 minutes, when they really realised they were up against it, they go. And look, I know it's not as easy, Gary, as saying we'll start like that, but we have to find a way, or rather Russell Martin has to find a way to get them to start like that, because it's a thing as old as time. Any smaller club coming to Ibrox goes, first 20 minutes, keep it tight, get the crowd on their back. Well, if you're continually giving away first halves, and Rangers have been doing this all calendar year 2025 and longer, that's exactly what is going to happen. And you know that the fans have got 15 years really worth, as David mentioned there, of neuroses built up about what they're seeing and what the outcome is when they see this stuff. No point complaining about it. You just got to deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing super surprising that we've seen with anything. of the first two games domestically, where maybe Motherwell's intensity throughout the entire game was something maybe you've not quite seen before. But they've got a new manager in, and they've got a new bit of excitement, and it's the first game of the season, it's on TV and such like that. But like, that's just a mild surprise. Like, you're going to get teams that are going to go for you. They're going to get teams that are not going to give you any space. You're going to get teams that are going to do the low block, the 1-10 formation or the 1-5-5 formation. And you have to figure out a way to break that down. And, I did, like, the only thing on the weekend there was I didn't see like a lot of players not trying or anything like that. It was almost like they were kind of clueless as to what they were supposed to do a little bit on the field, but as to why that was such a big deal. I never gave the ball away. And I'll give you an anecdotal example, right? We were playing the football in Florida this year at the NARSA convention, and I was getting, as you know, booed every touch at the sidelines and such like that.
Mainly by me.
And exactly, I think you were starting it, and then I said, well, just to be super clear, I just kind of a quip to the sidelines. I says, all the goals haven't came from my side, and Bomber right on me right away saying, hey, this is a team game. This is a team game, and you don't say that, And I was like, okay, all right, he's on the bandwagon as well, and it's exactly like that. There doesn't seem to be this like collective understanding of their role within a team and the team's role overall, and that just it's almost like it's kind of mechanical. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I've got three options when I get the ball, and I'll take one of the three options, and then I'm going to be quite happy with what I'm doing. And instead of just going out and saying, let's absolutely go hell for leather here for the first 15 minutes. We'll get these fans right on our side from the very, very beginning. Super high intensity. Worst case scenario, we go 1-0 down. I'd much rather go 1-0 down in the first 10 minutes than the last 10, and we'll just see how it goes. But for whatever reason, and as you say, I mean, this is decades old. Like, this isn't something new. Like, what is that all about? I mean, I play amateur football here, and not amateur level. I'm just like, beer league football here. And we have an honest conversation before it saying either keep it tight or go for it right away, see what these guys have got. And we actually execute that. So I just don't understand. Are we getting too scientific? Are we complicating things too much? Are we not actually listening to either the instructions from the coaches or the feedback, direct feedback that's coming from the stands right away? Either way, or it's a concoction of the whole thing. Either way, what they're doing right now is very, very obviously not working, and they need to do something quite different. And the manager saying afterwards, maybe I should have made some substitutions earlier to add a wee bit more energy. Cool story, bro. You might have done that an hour ago before you actually had to come into the press conference and say that.
Dave, he's not in any danger. I mean, that's one thing. Fans can have their opinion of whether he should sack him tomorrow or, he'll be gone by October or anything like that. But he isn't in danger. The new owners have pinned their mast to this guy, and they're not going to react to it. So he knows he's got time. And I felt that at the press conference, actually, at the weekend. I thought, this is not a guy who feels he's under pressure. Because unfortunately, I've seen enough Rangers managers the last few years who've been under pressure to know what one looks like. But we need an improvement, and we need one pronto. And look, we've got Pilsen this week. I think we'll go through. You never know, obviously, if we play like that. But I think I don't have any worries about those games. And strangely, I don't have any worries about the Old Firm game. I know people are saying, they're cut. I've no doubt that you'll see a great version of Rangers that day. But I shouldn't be turning up against Dundee going, I wonder what this is going to be like today.
Yeah, well, look, I think the reality of it is I've always been of the view that you got to win your bread and butter games, because I think we, for too many seasons, have entered into Old Firms, particularly that kind of Christmas, New Year Old Firm, where in many ways, the season's sort of almost gone. And it's this case of, if we lose, they want to be, double figure points ahead. We've got to win this game to just keep ourselves alive. And I think that, you only put yourself into a position to win the championship if you're winning virtually all your home games, especially against sides who, like I know, having spoken indirectly to David Healy about his link to the Dundee job. I mean, the general feeling was anyone who was taking that Dundee job, their role was to keep Dundee in the league. So, if that's the attitude of Dundee at the start of the season, then, quite frankly, any Rangers team worth their salt, and I go back to even under Pedro Caixinha, we should be winning games like that. I think one of the things, and look, as you say, Russell Martin's in absolutely no danger, and nor he should be. I mean, we just, at the end of the day, and I think I said this, certainly I said within our group, Davey, and maybe even publicly, that we did not have managers kicking the door down to take us over in the summer. So we were either going to end up with, someone like a David Ancelotti, who had never done the job before anywhere, someone like a Russell Martin, who was essentially out of work, and therefore was in the running. And bluntly, most managers out of work are out of work because they've been sacked. Therefore, there's going to be some sort of negative track record. Or thirdly, going back to someone like a Stephen Gerrard, whether or not that was ever really a runner is still up for debate. So at the end of the day, we are where we are, and Russell Martin is in the hot seat because he was seen as the best of the names who either put their names forward or were headhunted. So one of the things, and indulge me for a second, I mean, I had a sort of a conversation with someone who I would say knows a bit about football, not involved at Rangers. At the start of the season, I said, look, I actually texted to him, just reading it here, and I said, look, a few straightforward KPIs for Russell Martin in the early stages. I said, minimum Champions League playoff, win the first Old Firm, get to the League Cup final, and be within at least 4 points going into the second Old Firm, which I actually think that last one was probably a bit too light for me. But anyway, his reply was, for me, it's all about July and August. No shambles in the friendlies. Friendlies, I wouldn't say were shambolic, but they weren't great. Champions League playoff minimum, which I think we're all hopeful that will happen. Drop 0 points in first 3 league games. Well, we've got 2 points out of 6,
That's
so
going.
speaks for itself. And the last one was the first Old Firm at Ibrox is a must win. Now, look, that's essentially just two blokes having a chat about football, but I think in a way it does sum up that my fear is, and I know, look, we've already said it within our group, Davy, my fear is that because of now the postponed game at St Mirren, there's actually a danger that we could be in the Champions League group stages, but be double figures behind them going into the first international break. And I'm sort of saying that sort of half chuckling because I'm thinking, what an utter disastrous start that would be. And actually, the real challenge we've got is, Gio got us to the group stages of the Champions League for the first time in years upon years, and he was out of a job a matter of a few months later. And I think the reality of it is, and it goes back to every single one Rangers fan agrees, the domestic game outweighs everyone would have taken winning the league in 2022 over getting to Seville. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the real difficulty we've got here, is breaking that cycle of winning the turgid games, as you say, the equivalent of Liverpool against Bournemouth, the old cliche about can he do it away to Stoke on a wet, windy Tuesday night. And that's the challenge that I think we face, is if we're going to continue this outperforming expectations in Europe and then underperforming domestically, I kind of, we're going to be basically having this conversation this time next year, aren't we?
Well, that's the thing. People say, we need to break the cycle of sacking managers and stuff, and that's true. But that happens if the
If
team
the manager breaks the cycle,
We can't do
yeah.
it as supporters, right? We can discuss and we can go to the games and rant and rave or cheer, and we do, right? But we cannot change this. This is the thing, and the change that they that we need has to come from within the club. It is early, but I don't think it's unfair, guys, to say the signs aren't promising, and they're going to have to deliver stuff soon. And as David pointed out there, Europe on its own isn't that. They're going to have to start delivering domestic, not only results, but performances, and say to people, look, we're going to get this. Bumps in the road are one thing. At the moment, I'm not even sure we've got on the road domestically this season.
No, I don't think so. I mean, 2 points from a possible 6, you go, right, okay, that's not good enough. What were the teams? And then someone says to you it was Motherwell and it was Dundee. All right, both were away from home. No, both. One was at home and one was away from home. It's just, in any Rangers era, that's just nowhere near good enough. And then you add in the performances themselves, and there's the odd little sporadic thing within a game, within a 90-minute game, that you go, well, that was pretty good and that was pretty good. But other than that, not a lot to get excited about. And I was mentioning last week on the NASA podcast that I've got friends over here that are Southampton fans, and they had either lost or certainly hadn't won in their first 5 games in the Championship when he took over. And then they went on this incredible run for something like 25 games where they won 21 of them or something like that. And I think it was like a club record and such. And that's great. And if that's something we've got to look forward to, I still stand by my earlier comment of you should eradicate that beginning part, Russell, and that would really, really help us out. But, you know, the kind of dichotomy we have here is we've seen something incredible last Tuesday night, and then we've seen domestically this utter garbage. But anyway, back to what I was saying on the earlier and on the pod last week, like we just don't have that type of time in Scotland because that other team just pick up wins and pick up wins and pick up wins, and you know we're already 4 points behind, and with some tough games to come and such like that. You know, I mean, we shouldn't even be worrying about St Mirren, but we've been conditioned to worry about St Mirren now, and I don't know. I just don't see what's going to change domestically that is going to have us materially saying, right now, okay, yes, I get it now. That's exactly what it is. And right now, I honestly, and I know financially, maybe the folks at the club don't agree, but I couldn't care less about Europe right now because I'm absolutely fed up, you know, showing up to these games and expecting the worst, kind of getting the worst delivered to us and just not having a great time watching Rangers domestically for the most part. So who knows where this is going to go in terms of changing, but it's going to have to happen. It's going to have to happen very, very, very fast because he says the players have to learn. The coaching staff have to learn a little bit quicker than the players do.
Bang on. You mentioned John Brown earlier. John is actually our guest at the Heart and Hand live show, which takes place this Friday night at New Edmonton House. Tickets are £20 plus booking fee. You will not get to see Bomber for much cheaper than that. I've priced us against all these other nights, and we're more than competitive. He is absolutely fantastic. So even if you don't fancy seeing us live, and you should because we're great as well, Bomber being there will make it a splendid night. So go to Edmiston House. Tickets are in the bio for the show today, and come along and see us. It will be a fantastic night. Right then, thanks to our producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Myers, and thanks to my two splendid guests today. First of all, to David Graham.
Thanks, Davey. Pleasure, Gary. Great to hear from you. And I was going to say I hope you enjoyed that, listeners, but clearly they probably enjoyed it as much as we did having to do it, Davey. So onwards and upwards to the next one. Next game's the biggest game.
You never said great to hear from him when you worked there, did you?
Exactly.
Gary's all sweetness and light now, eh?
Yeah.
Gary, thank you so much, my man, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks a million. Great to connect with you guys. As always, things can only get better. And I'm confident that the next time we're all going to be together, it's going to be in much better circumstances. And hopefully that's soon.
Well, things can only get better, and they fucking have to. Right, folks, thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.